We are the Church of the Larger Fellowship, a Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundary, working toward creating a global spiritual community, rooted in profound love, which cultivates wonder, imagination, and the courage to act. Adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult for many bricks and mortar congregations. Early on in the pandemic, we were in a unique position to assist many congregations with the transition. We hosted special episodes of the VUU, provided advice and counseling to religious professionals, and trained congregations for live streaming worship, all while providing robust online programming for our members. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine to our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists. We are the Church of the Larger Fellowship, a Unitarian Universalist congregation with no geographical boundary, working toward creating a global spiritual community, rooted in profound love, which cultivates wonder, imagination, and the courage to act. Adapting to the COVID-19 pandemic has been difficult for many bricks and mortar congregations. Early on in the pandemic, we were in a unique position to assist many congregations with the transition. We hosted special episodes of The VUU, provided advice and counseling to religious professionals, and trained congregations for live streaming worship, all while providing robust online programming for our members. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine to our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison, and investing in innovative ministry. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and to fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The VUU. The VUU is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Voices of Unitarian Universalism, known as The VUU, or if you're Kiana Dene Perkins, friend of the show and former co-host, The VUU. Welcome to viewers and VUers alike. It is so good to be with you. I'm the Reverend Dr. Michael Tino. I serve as 1/3 of the lead ministry team of the Church of the Larger Fellowship, the congregation without borders or walls that hosts the VUU every week. I'm here with my friend and co-host, the Reverend Don Fortune. How are you today, Don?
I am well, Michael. Thank you. I'm here in South Jersey, and it's a gorgeous day, and I'm excited to see our guest today. I haven't seen Cindy since seminary, I think. Yeah, it's nice to have friendly faces, and Michael and I again are left unsupervised by the people who generally know better. So I'm looking forward to a fun show.
We are looking forward to the show. Greetings from the beautiful Hudson Valley of New York. I'm here. It was sunny. It's now cloudy. It changes. It's all good. Um, we are so excited to welcome our guests from the UU Ministry for the Earth today. Tanner Linden is behind the scenes doing tech for us. We apologize for that brief technical delay that our live viewers experienced, but we're on the air live now. Tanner will be relaying your comments on our live channels for those of you who are with us live to the panel, so that if you have questions for them, we will gladly relay those. We are, as I said, talking with folks from the UU Ministry for Earth today, and especially about spiritual grounding and worship in this time of climate crisis. And so we're really looking forward to getting into the spirituality of the work that they're doing. So let me introduce them without further ado. We have with us today Joshua Long, who is the director of music ensembles at the UU Church of Annapolis, Maryland. Joshua is a student at Wesley Theological Seminary working on an MDiv with specialization in public theology. He's participated in different climate justice events, and he is on the board of directors for UU Ministry for Earth. His heart for faith, climate justice, and social change is made clear in his music and his ministry. We have with us today Daniel Lawlor, who is excited to be the new co-director for fundraising and communications with the UU Ministry for Earth. Drawing on his family's example of engaged religious practice and community work in Rhode Island, Daniel is inspired by caring communities and honored to witness the joys and sorrows in our faith. Daniel and Yumi, his wife, live in Brooklyn. So, hello from just up the Hudson River. A former middle school teacher and development director, Daniel is a proud graduate of Boston University School of Theology and served as a ministerial intern at First Unitarian Church of Boston. And Daniel hopes to meet you at a climate justice event. And we are also joined by Cindy Davidson. The Reverend Cindy Davidson has served as the board chair of the UU Ministry for Earth for the last 2 years and has been a board member for 8 years. She's an ordained UU minister and previously served the 4th UU congregation of Westchester in Mohegan Lake, New York, which is about 4 miles in that direction from my house. So I know Cindy, and I'm glad to be here with her again. Cindy's pathway to ordained ministry took root in her home congregation, First Parish in Lexington, Massachusetts, where she was active with the Green Sanctuary and social action teams. She is a Green Faith Fellow and holds an MDiv from Meadville Lombard Theological School. So, Joshua and Daniel and Cindy, it is so good to be with us. So good to have you with us. Tell us a little bit, Daniel, if you would, about the mission of UU Ministry for Earth, and
Absolutely.
how it's evolving.
Totally. Thank you so much for having us. One of the things that I find really grounding about UU Ministry for Earth is part of what we do is spiritual and educational grounding, and our other tradition is accountable action. So really this blend of the spiritual and educational support so that we understand and grow in community around climate justice and environmental justice issues. And then also through the program partnerships, everything from our BIPOC Caucus for Climate Justice to UU Young Adults for Climate Justice to the convenings that happen at different times of the year, we try to create multiple spaces for people as people of faith, as UUs, to engage in the issues of environmental justice. To me, that's energizing, and I was pulled into this by just when I met with Cindy and Joshua just over the last few months, hearing more about the work, I could just tell their passion and excitement for it.
So, Cindy and Joshua, maybe you want to add into this conversation and share some of that passion. I know you come to this work as UU ministers and candidate for the UU minister. How does UU ministry? How does this work feed your spirit and connect to your theology?
I can
Go ahead.
I'll jump in. First, really great to see you guys. I would say the climate crisis really feels like the impending thing. So all social justice work really depends on how we address the climate crisis. And so when I think about our spiritual grounding, both for myself and for ministry, I think our relationship to nature, earth, how we connect to earth, how we do that in worship and in our own lives is really crucial. Because I think that is really part of the sustaining nature of doing environmental justice work. And that's when we don't have these areas that ground us, if we are not taking time to just spend time with the trees, to get to know the mountains, get to know the ocean, in a real real touch and feel place, we can get really lost in the work and sort of forget why we're doing the things we're doing.
That I think one of the most important things that we do at UU Ministry for Earth is to bring the faith perspective into environmental and climate work. Surely there are lots of other organizations that are doing very important things, but as UUs, we always bring our principles into the public square and into our congregational team meetings and things like this. So that faith perspective is very important. And it's something that we have to develop. We have to flex those muscles, build our spiritual resilience to be able to sustain the kind of activism that is needed these days. You know, we're in a climate emergency. I heard a gentleman yesterday who was the chair of the Interfaith Power and Light, Reverend Dr. Gerald Durley, say in a conference yesterday, we are in a pandemic, yes, but we are in a climademic. And I love that term. I hadn't heard anyone use it before. But it really puts forth the urgency rather than saying we have 8 years, we have 10 years, we're in a climademic. That gets it home. And to sustain the kind of changes that are needed, we need to be spiritually grounded in our daily lives and also our communal lives. So that's the kind of work that we're trying to help support and further.
Yeah, I was having a conversation just yesterday with someone who, you know, was overwhelmed
Yeah.
by just the just the sheer magnitude of the climate crisis that's in front of us. And you know, to me, overwhelm is in part a spiritual condition that we have to address religiously. You know, certainly, yeah, just do stuff is is part of it, and we're going to get to things that you're doing when you come back in 2 weeks, right? But today we're here to talk about that spiritual grounding. So, what do you say to people? Because I imagine you hear it all the time as Ministry for the Earth. Someone says to you, you know, I read the stories about the IPCC, I think I'm getting that right, report, and it's just overwhelming. And I'm like one person, and there are 7.5 billion people on the earth, and I can't do this. Like, what? How do you respond spiritually to that?
Daniel, do you want to comment on that? I know.
One
Yeah.
thing that I find grounding with UU Ministry for Earth is we have so many affiliate traditions that maybe emphasize UU Christian Fellowship, UU Humanist, the Pagan Covenant. Within UU Ministry for Earth, it's like a meeting place. It can be a vehicle where multiple theologies can kind of come together. I think as a larger ministry, and Joshua can speak to this more eloquently than I can, but the Earth-based service that kind of came out of this pandemic crisis, some of the viewers may have encountered the UU Ministry for Earth Day service last year, and I think that for us as a ministry was a growing point of how do we offer worship services that can kind of connect in a UU liturgy the aches and heartaches. Personally, I've been really drawn to the theology of Howard Thurman, as former chaplain at Howard University, former dean at Boston University, just a tremendous voice for interfaith spirituality and mentor to Martin Luther King, Jesse Jackson, so many mid-20th century civil rights leaders. And one phrase Dr. Thurman really emphasized was, we can never return to innocence, but we can move forward with integrity. And for me, that's this kind of invitation to think in our personal practices, what are habits we can cultivate to center and meet one another in our churches to connect. So that's a grounding place for me.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought came of doing the Earth Day worship service was that in the past we've done a lot of resources for congregations to use, and this was an attempt to really create something uh, that was both a complete grounding space and as well offer up, hey, if you need to use this, you can use this piece of the service, you can use this music and whatnot. And what we found was, I think partially was a way to serve UUs both in the pandemic, where in a virtual church world, producing, which worship when online becomes a bit of production, if you will. Producing worship services is a lift, and so being able to offer different resources for congregations to use, I think, was something a bit of an eye opener, and it's allowing us to kind of explore what other ways we can serve through spiritual grounding and resources that people can use, and of course to encourage other people that these are all different ways to really address, as you mentioned, that overwhelming, that climate anxiety that's coming up for a lot of us. When you mentioned overwhelming, I felt the chills in my body. Just yes, it's so overwhelming. But when we come together in worship, when we find places to in a pandemic sing silently or sing in our homes, or places to have our spiritual practices um, both in our own backyards and as a community, those are areas where we can kind of move through that climate anxiety that can feel so paralyzing for many people, and move to a place where we do see uh, places to act, where we can see chances for hope and change.
I have a question, if it's all right. I've been thinking a lot about accessibility as we're trying to change worship in in the congregation I serve, from we used to be on Zoom, and now we're in person, but we're still trying to do live stream, and my focus is on accessibility. How do we make everything accessible to folks who maybe can't get out of the house, or who are physically challenged, or medically fragile? And I've been thinking a lot about how much the congregation I serve is really devoted to the natural world. Um, they have a building that is built in the Pinelands of South Jersey. It is a 100% green building. It's heated with geothermal stuff. It's got solar everywhere. Um, and yet, as I watch my congregation and my congregants age, I see them less and less able to get close to the earth and experience the earth in ways that used to be deeply meaningful for them. Um, and I'm thinking also about folks, like some folks when they move into an assisted care situation, or if they get into a high-rise apartment building where they don't have access necessarily to even be able to touch grass anymore. Um, and I'm thinking, how do I um, provide access for them to the natural world, to the spiritual grounding of an earth-centered practice, when they're no longer able to touch the earth?
I don't think that's the nut we've cracked open, Dawn. To tell you
Glad I
the
could help,
truth.
Cindy. Glad I could help.
But I mean, you do raise a very important point for people who are aging or medically fragile, and also people who just simply lack access because of the community they live in. So it does cover all age spectrums. So I think those are very important things, and I don't know the solutions. I know some workarounds I would use, which are things like there are studies that show, for instance, the effect of looking at a horizon, how it reduces your anxiety and cortisol levels, and that the same effect can be replicated by looking at a painting or a photograph of the horizon. Now, I don't know that the tactile part of touching the earth would be quite the same with a photo or a picture. I doubt it. So I think exactly it doesn't. And we all know that the sound of the ocean waves or the feel of the salt spray in the air is, you can't capture that digitally. So unfortunately, I don't have a solution, but I can empathize with how challenging that would be.
I wonder if part of our response is through ritual, and if this is something that can be addressed in worship in a certain way.
I think the visualization
we bring things
definitely.
in to our worship service, and I just like I think so. Joshua, for example, you do music, and as a musician, evoke things in worship. You have a particular artistic lens on how to bring things into a worship sense, and I just think I wonder. I'm thinking out loud right now, so please feel free.
Well,
to just...
if you may, I want to add to this idea of how to minister to our differently able-bodied communities, and I think that ritual is so important. I think also having those people in the congregation who can visit and assist in allowing people to find ways to connect right in their home, ways, and as you said, is there a window? Just having, when I pull up the blinds, and yes, there are cars outside, but I can see a sky. That is, to me, is just huge. And in terms of worship, how to dress up with music and liturgy and art, those are the things that might also, if we're being conscious of the different ways people experiencing spirituality, whether it's finding music, the visual aspects, whether it's in the offering meditations, or one thing I think about is our water ceremony and our flower communion, blessing of the animals. These are all rituals that we have that, well, yes, they come around at certain parts of the year, highlighting those things and finding ways, well, how do they spill over into the rest of worship? Those are things that maybe we can think about. As I don't have all the solutions as Cindy's saying, but it's definitely, I really appreciate that acknowledgement.
One thing, Joshua, you've raised before that really influenced me is thinking about how we normalize, like in our worship service, liturgies of lament, building into our prayers or meditations, just references to reality that we're living in. And Ali Tharp, who you'll meet, your viewers will meet in 2 weeks or so at the next UUMFE show on the VUU, really has a whole vision of our local congregations learning about the endangered species in the area and creating laments that are particular to the communities and the areas that we're in, and really trying to foster through worship, even as we experience it on Zoom, just reminders that we're in a place, and that place has particular identities and stories that we're part of, and that our worship communities can take time to elevate.
Yeah, I think about the choir in the congregation I serve here in Mount Kisco, New York, has a favorite piece that they love to sing called River. It's a Bill Staines piece that you might be familiar with, but it was arranged for choir by a former musician who was at our congregation years ago, and they love to sing it. So I have them sing it on a regular basis. And during the pandemic, they did this virtual recording that so many people did. They all recorded themselves, and one person mixed it together, and whatever they could do to be safe. And then they made videos out of those recordings. And the person who made the video, because we're here in Westchester County, New York, just a little north of New York City, accompanied the the song with photographs of the Hudson River from its source at Lake Tyr in the clouds in the Adirondacks, all the way down through the Hudson Valley to the Verrazano Narrows in New York. So as they're singing this song about the river rolling to the sea, they're being grounded in the beauty and the phenomenal beauty of the particular river that feeds us here in New York. And it was, I was just like, I had to take a moment of like prayer after I saw this video for the first time, because I knew where all those pictures came from, right? I travel up and down the state of New York, and so I've been to these places, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I know what lake that is, because I know how the person who puts together our music videos thinks about these things. And it was just such a beautiful grounding experience, is the best way I can put it, just to really to connect us with the particular part of the earth that we are planted on as a congregation right now. And it really made a difference that that's the way he thought about this piece. I'm wondering if you all have examples from worship or ritual, or even your own spiritual practice that might help people have that sort of that sort of feeling.
Well, I'm not in a congregational setting right now, so I don't have anything that I've used recently. But I am a person who came to the whole idea of spiritual grounding a little agnostically. And to be honest, it was in seminary when I had that class on spiritual practices for healing and wholeness that I said,
Oh,
okay,
geez.
to
Oh, my
do
God.
that. Maybe don't finish it.
Oh,
And
God,
it
that was a brutal class.
Yes, and it was a smorgasbord, an introduction to all sorts of practices. And that's where I really learned to get out of my scientific humanist approach to life and connect with something else, and to also stop getting tripped up by religious language from other traditions. I grew up Methodist, and that just tripped me up endlessly. Okay. So, and we were introduced to such a range of spiritual practice: lamentation, the wailing wall, meditation, walking, chanting, um, yoga, centering prayer, and Lectio Divina. And that's the one that grabbed me, probably because I love words and reading. And so, and we did a lot of art. Yeah. And we had to commit because it was a class, you had to commit, and ministers should know these things. So I recall sort of doubling down on the idea of Lectio Divina, which is supposed to be that you read a passage and that it inspires you, and then you reflect on it, etc. And instead of using scriptures exclusively, I used a lot of environmental writings. So I would go to nature writers. I would go to commentarians like Bill McKibben, a book of essays about climate and moral grounding, things like this. And I found that I could really do with that kind of material what spiritual practices are meant to do, which is to have you wrestle with your place in this world that we call the interdependent web of life. And it's a place to be vulnerable and find some strength and some resilience and really hone in on what you believe and what you stand for, etc. So I just want to put out there that the idea of spiritual practices is something I am concerned a lot of people are afraid of or shy of. But in our tradition, we can embrace and look at so many different sources, including direct experience, right? And value them equally and find what works for us and what speaks for us. And I find that if I take the time to get that spiritual grounding for myself, and it changes, it's fluid, I don't always do the same thing, that it helps sustain the challenges that we meet when we are doing activist work or trying to move an organization forward or whatever our personal ministry is. So I just want to reiterate how important I think that is and how varied it can be. That we need to be welcoming and accepting and supporting people in all the different approaches. And I think with nature, so many people say nature is my church. And I think that's true. And there's something very special there. When we have that deep reverence for life, we are more prone to protect it with our heart and soul.
That'll preach. Oh, Cindy, thank you so much. I was in that class with Cindy.
Right.
And I confess I was a hot mess that year. That was just a few months after my father had died, and so I signed up for this class, Spiritual Practice for Healing. And oh boy, it was intense. But in that class, I learned also that art was a way for me to heal.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the way you described how you took the environmental commentary, the prose and the deep, passionate writings about the earth and nature and this wonderful world in which we live, and look to that as a vehicle through which to challenge your own place in this world. You know, one of the great things that religion does is it answers and asks again, who are we, why are we here, and what are we going to do about it? And I think that is a marvelous way. And I also want to note that that does not actually require getting outside and getting your toes in the dirt. You know, that's wonderful. So, but yeah, I'm wondering, and I don't want to take up too much space here, but I know that this past week in Washington D.C. there has been a ton of daily climate action stuff happening outside the White House. There have been some distressing things coming out of Washington about potential cuts to the budget in the area of climate. And I'm wondering, first off, what all are you all doing in this professional ministry for environmental things? And then, of course, the follow-up question to that would be, what can our members do? What can our listeners do? What can our congregations do to support that work?
If I can just jump in, yes, there's an organization called Build Back Fossil Free. Build Back Fossil Free. And they are sponsoring the Peoples versus Fossil Fuels events of this week. And I was in Washington on Monday for the action, which was entirely led by Indigenous people. I think about 135 people were arrested. We marched we centered ourselves in prayer and music, and we followed the lead of the Indigenous leaders. Went to the White House, which is federal property. So if you're on the White House sidewalk and you don't leave when they ask you to, then you get your 3 warnings and get arrested. So the speakers there spoke about about Biden, excuse me, about Biden's not coming through on his pledges to Indigenous people and the use of their treaty lands and stopping the fossil fuel infrastructure. Those kind of activities are continuing all this week. Yesterday was a day of the multi-faith clergy on site, but I was gone by then. But we had some other UU ministers, quite a few, who have been involved. The way for listeners who aren't in Washington, D.C. this week to get involved is to look up Build Back Fossil Free and go to the Ministry for Earth website and look for resources where you can sign on to petitions, send Biden a letter, these kinds of things, and take local action. Another organization organizing local action for this coming weekend is Green Faith. And Daniel might be able to fill me in because my details might be off, but Ministry for Earth and it's collaborating on something this coming weekend.
Absolutely. And if you go to the UU Ministry for Earth website, on October 18th, UU Ministry for Earth and Side with Love are hosting a UU's for Climate Justice online action that you can tune into, be part of. We'll be preparing phone banking outreach to elected representatives and other actions. And throughout this fall, there are going to be a sequence of ways people can get involved through the UU Ministry for Earth umbrella to be involved in environmental justice advocacy. On the website, there are a few links that'll go through and kind of highlight the calendar. One thing too, that as much as there's the immediate crisis, I want to hold up, hopefully this gets on, but Justice on Earth is an amazing resource. I'm going to tag Joshua to add details, but it's people of faith working at the intersection of race, class, and the environment. It's from Skinner House. It is deep. It is reflective. You have everyone from amazing lay leaders like Paula Cole-Jones to various ministers from Reverend Mel Hoover all over the country who are reflecting on Unitarian Universalism, climate crisis, environmental justice. And if you haven't read it, it can be transformative because it'll ask questions about what our faith means in this moment.
I will piggyback that book is, I think, a must read for UU, a must read for Unitarian Universalist climate activists and justice warriors. And for me, one of the things that it highlights is that when we think about climate justice, there are many times we want to compartmentalize and segment. Okay, I'm the environment, we're thinking about nature. When we think about justice, we're only thinking about people or whatnot, and not to see how they're all really connected, how both the economics, our original sin of white supremacy and colonization, and our destruction of the environment are really all nicely, I shouldn't say nicely, they're unfortunately intertwined in a very dismal way. And I think in addressing the climate crisis, our approach needs to be in a multi-tiered. We need to be thinking about all these things. So when we're thinking about our spiritual grounding, and next week we'll talk more about this, but our 8th principle, that is really important in thinking of dismantling oppressions. When we think about dismantling how white supremacy and colonization has pretty much been one of the, I would say, one of the biggest proprietors of the climate crisis. So within our spiritual grounding, we have to be thinking of those lens of what does it mean to care for Earth, and saying that as human beings, we are part of Earth. We are not this separate entity. That's why our 7th principle is so important in thinking those things. But as we think about actions we can take, as we think about this month, I think we need to just see how the politics of the day, the environmental justice, the climate crisis, all those things, everything is just very much linked. So please go to UU Ministry for Earth website and participate in ways that you can. This is a crucial month, and read the book Justice on Earth. But this is a crucial month when it comes to climate change, as we're entering the CLP26, the United Nations conference in Glasgow, and reason why both the addressing climate justice and the politics are going to be so interlinked. And so it's really crucial for us to get involved and to still stay grounded, to not lose ourselves in this work.
I think people should also know that if they search the VUU archives, we had authors from Justice on Earth on the VUU when that book came out, which is now a year or two ago.
Mhm.
So that was a great conversation too. So search the VUU archives for Justice on Earth and watch that episode. I think one thing you're getting at that I think we need to be explicit about is that both systems of domination and the abuse of power, and the theologies of resilience and resistance that develop in response to those systems, um, are connected across whatever power you're talking about being abused, right? So when we understand that um, BIPOC communities, that poor communities, that disabled people are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis, are disproportionately affected by pollution because of where polluting industries are sited, and that communities that have faced oppression have deep theologies of resilience and resistance. That those of us who don't come from those communities need to be studying.
Mhm.
Those of us who are white, and especially white men, need to be studying womanist theology, to learn about uh, what it means to make a way out of no way, what it means to move forward in whatever way we can, despite the overwhelming odds against us, because of the structures that have been created by the people in power. Um, so like both the systemic abuse of power, the white supremacy culture, it's all connected, and also the theologies that are needed to address it are connected across those identities and those uses of power as well. um, I think it's important to note that in this work. So I understand you all came with some stories too, and if you haven't had a chance to tell them, we have about 10 minutes left in our show, and I want to make sure that you have a chance to tell the stories that you came here to share with our viewers. So, are there things that you wanted to make sure our people heard?
I'll jump in. Um, I think
Please.
one of the things for me that's been sustaining for me as a musician is that art piece and that creativity. Uh, and so being able to, for me, it's I'll take my guitar, drive up to the mountains, and just like find ways either write music or do something. And I don't want that to be limited to just the music directors, or the ministers do this stuff, or things like that. I think ways that in our own world that we can do these same practices, I think is really important. And so finding ways to create art, poetry, dance, um, whether it is for just you in your bedroom or it's for you and you're going out to perform for whoever. Um, I think that's really important. Something I that comes to mind is my mother. She never danced in public. But one of her own, when I remember growing up, she would just like, I'm dancing. And she'd be in there, she'd close the door and you hear music. And that was a sustaining thing for my mother. Just a way of finding resilience. And for me, other ways is to really ground yourself in your communities that are there, to really find those meaningful moments of connection with people, because that reminder that with the climate crisis, the Earth will keep spinning, and what really we're trying to address is, will it be a livable planet for all living beings? That's really what we're trying to address. And so to connect with other humans is part of that grounding and part of that reminder of like, yes, this is part of being alive. This is part of being human, of being a species in this universe.
Yeah, this Sunday in Church of the Larger Fellowships, 8 p.m. Eastern Time worship service, also available 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday. Translate that as you wish wherever you are in the world. We're actually going to be talking about dance and creativity and songwriting as embodied forms of prayer for people of all bodies and abilities. So hopefully, if people are inspired by your your exhortation to dance and move as a spirituality, as a spiritual practice, you can get some practice with that with the Reverend Aaron Walter on Sunday night. Cindy and Daniel, did you also have stories to share?
Okay, I know. I think I sort of preached my closing words already, as Ron said. But I just want to reiterate that the importance of taking the time to be spiritually grounded and building your own resilience, and then working to make that a part of the culture of a community you live in, whether that's whether you're in a brick and mortar congregation, or you're in a small group setting somewhere, or you're somewhere on your own. It's really important that we have that strength, but that we also realize that we can't do this alone. And so we don't want to be alone. We want to be part of a movement. So find your people wherever they are, 1, 2, or more, to do this work. And also, I think when we talk about climate justice activism, environmental justice activism, we tend to go to the extreme activist thought, like, oh, I'm not ready to chain myself to the White House fence, right? But we need to realize there are roles for everyone in the revolution, right? We need our caretakers. We need the people on the back line backing up and providing the support. We need the people out in front. We need the people going to the policy meetings in the town. We need the people trying to move the congregation into the Green Sanctuary program. We need all these different things. So there is a role there for you somewhere. But the challenge is to be grounded enough that you can find the right role for you.
Thank you. My thought is encouraging. Look at UU Ministry for Earth. We have the Young Adult Caucus for Climate Justice. We have the BIPOC Caucus for Climate Justice. We have a group that meets each month called Strengthening Local Climate Commitments for folks who are really into policy in their local city or town. There are a lot of communities of UUs. There are a lot of communities of people in general, but even within our UU association, there are communities of folks gathering to accompany one another in these heartache times. And we know that the reality is crisis, but even in crisis, we can accompany one another. And to me, that's what's healing and hopeful. Is in our congregations, we light candles of joy and sorrow. And I feel our work is to live in those moments of joys and sorrow together.
Thank you so much. it's been mentioned a couple times that folks from UU Ministry for Earth will be joining us in 2 weeks again on The View to talk a little bit more about programs and initiatives that are happening. Do you want to give us a 2-minute preview of, I guess, Allie Tharp, the other co-director of co-executive director of UUMFE, will be joining us then? But does someone want to give us like a 2-minute preview of what people can look forward to in 2 weeks?
It will be a delightful surprise, but you will meet Allie Tharp and also Paula Cole-Jones, who's one of the co-chairs of the BIPOC Caucus for Climate Justice. We'll have different leaders involved in community and activist work who are partners of UUMFE or leaders of some of our caucuses. So it's going to be a good one. I'm going to tune in. I hope you do too.
And we know Paula well. She is a friend of us personally and of The View. So we're going to be happy to see Paula and to meet Allie. Next week on The View, we will be talking with Stacy Borden of New Beginnings Reentry Services. Stacy is doing work with incarcerated women as they end their time of incarceration and are re-entering the free world, and it's difficult and important work that she's going to be talking with us about. So we're looking forward to that conversation and coming back to environmental justice in 2 weeks. Anyone have any last things you want to say before we wrap up?
I'll just add first, thank y'all for having us, and I think going forward as parting words, just remember that we are in crisis, we are in code red, and the more that we can both highlight these things in our daily life and our worship service, our congregations, not from a place of, I don't want to say panic. I think you should panic for a little bit, and then because you want to move. You need to move through those emotions. You need to move through the anxiety. You can't stuff it down, but to come from a place of groundedness, and we do that through our spiritual grounding, and that's what our being a faith movement is all about. That's what we're here to do.
Right.
I want to thank the three of you for coming. I'm sorry, Cindy. You go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you for having us. And Dawn.
Yes. It has just been delightful to see the three of you and to hear. I often get wrapped up in the negative, the overwhelm. Oh, the sky is falling. It's all, but to remember the lesson of resilience. But so thank you for that. Thank you. That's my own personal thing. Just thank you for reminding me about that.
There is a meditation by Thurman that we can check on the UUA worship web, but The Growing Edge. And there's a line in it that says, like, all around us worlds are dying and new worlds are being born. All around us life is dying and life is being born. The fruit ripens on the tree. The roots are silently at work in the darkness of the earth against the time when there shall be new leaves, fresh blossoms, green fruit. Such is the growing edge. And that's just a stanza. You can check out the whole thing, but that's that extra breath, he says, that extra breath is what keeps me going. So,
Well, we can't really improve upon the beautiful words of the Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman. So thank you so much. This has been The View, and we've been really excited to have this conversation, and we hope to see you again. Those of you who are out there and watching this, we hope to see you again next week.
Bye-bye. Right. Thank you.
Be well, everyone.
Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit CLFUU.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The View.